Howdy folks, this is Big Sam. Today I'm going to show you a neat trick you can use to date some of the parts on your Mosin Nagant. You see, a lot of Mosin Nagants, whether they're refurbished or from Finland, a lot of times the parts on them will actually be either much older or much newer than the rifle itself is. Here's one way we can figure out one of the parts. So this is a bolt I just pulled from a random rifle. And we can see here, we have a triangle with an arrow in it. So this bolt body was made by the Ijevsk arsenal sometime after 1928. But there was still a lot of Mosin Nagants made after 1928. Is there any better way we can get a date range on this? Well, yes we can. Here's why. You might have seen our video earlier, and if you haven't, go check it out because it's going to help here. There's another way, for instance, on the bolt body, where around 1936, they changed the style from this two-piece shaft, to a two-piece shaft from this earlier type, which is all just one piece. And that happened around 1936, and if you're interested about the details of how and why that was done, go check out our video on that. But what we know here is that this style of bolt body was made sometime during or after 1936, okay? Now, the thing we're going to look at today is the serial number. So our serial number on this bolt body is 167360. And I recognize this font as being reminiscent from the late 30s Spanish Civil War era. So this appears to be an original font from the factory, which is great. And the reason this is great is, here's an interesting little tidbit. In 1938, both the Tula and the Ijevsk arsenal started putting a 2 Cyrillic letter prefix before the serial number. Before 1938, the serial number was just a number, like 167,000. So, since we don't see our Cyrillic prefix here, we just see a number, we know this bolt was made before 1938. And that's really interesting, because now we have a better bounds of when this bolt body was made. Because again, we know because of this style here, it's not the earlier style, remember. This is the later style that came around sometime probably 1936. At some point, right along with the hex receiver is probably when these changes started to come around. Or when the hex receiver went away, and we'd come to the round receiver. Generally, this style of bolt you should associate with a hex receiver. And this one you should associate with a round receiver. That's another good way of looking at it. But getting back to when we think this was made, remember, this was probably made during or after 1936, but because of the serial number, we know this was made before 1938. So this was probably made in 1936 or 1937. So we know we can actually, based on some logic here and deductions, we can narrow down the date that this particular bolt body was made to a 2-year window. And that's really neat. Now, we can't always get that lucky, and some of our other parts, right, like this guy, the cocking piece, we can't necessarily do that with, because there's no serial number here. We just have this little Tula star to tell us, okay, it was made after 1928. So remember, the Mosin Nagant, the only serialized parts are the barrel itself, the bolt body, the butt plate, and the magazine floor plate. Not the magazine itself, but the floor plate. Sometimes you'll also see a serial number here on the back of the cocking piece. Well, we'll talk about that another day, but that's much earlier. We wouldn't see that in like the late 1930s like we see on this one. So really those 4 parts, though, you can use this trick to help determine when the dates were. Again, we look at the serial number to see okay, is there a Cyrillic prefix or not? Now, this can get a little tricky though, because it helps to have a little bit of experience looking at serial numbers. Because a lot of times, especially in 9130s, we have what's called force match numbers. And that's kind of an ambiguous term. It could actually mean a lot of things, but generally what it implies is it'll only have like the last 3 or 4 digits of the serial number, even if the whole serial number has a Cyrillic prefix on it. So that's when things like that can get confusing. So it helps to realize, okay, is this an original serial number? Or is this a serial number that's been scrubbed off and re-added as a force-matched serial number by one of the refurbishment arsenals? Well, that's one of those things you sort of have to just look at and try to figure out. But this is another tool we have in our toolbox to help date parts for Mosin Nagants. Remember, before 1938, Cyrillic prefixes were not used on serial numbers, on original parts. But force match numbers, a lot of times, will not have the Cyrillic prefix. So that's one other thing you have to be aware of. Just kind of look for grinding marks and other things to try to figure out, okay, is this a refurbished part, or is this the original serial number on that part? So hopefully that didn't confuse y'all too much, but I appreciate you watching, and maybe you learned something from all of this, from me rambling about Mosin Nagants, as I usually do. So thank you guys for watching. Let me know what y'all would like to see next. Let me know if y'all have any prayer requests, and I'll see you next time.